afternoon, everyone on Substack. To see all of you, Thinner and Backbone, presenting the shadow pushing the policies. I'm Nick Perklis today, but have a discussion into and shadow taint or shadow, whatever you want to call them, the government behind the scenes. Stephen Miller, and focusing on Stephen Miller today. In the past, and we will continue to speak about, obviously, a lot of policy and a lot of driven. Most of the propaganda is the rhetoric. Is then having any audio issues? It's hard to tell when. So the art, if you can hear me there. Oh, I think. Give me a sec. Is he a side? Is the audio, or is it still cyborg? Are we good? Are connected, can get us going, but just want. How about now? Can you all hear me better? Okay. Let's try something. Still terrible. Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that any different? I want to see. I'm trying some new things or trying to be clever. Sound is slow and scratchy. Okay. This continues to work the way that it is. If it does, that should let us move forward. So let me start again. Good afternoon, good late morning, good time of day to you, depending on what time zone you're in. And it is good to see everyone. This is Palantalk. Today is episode 9, The Shadow Pushing the Policies. And we are going to be discussing Stephen Miller. And we will be going into a little bit of his backstory, some of the life. Good afternoon, Monica, Sunny. Let's see if I can find some more names. Beth, Ellen. There's a going back in time here. Bob, Winterish, Bradford. Thank you, everyone, for coming in. Betty, Margaret, it's good to see all of you, have you all here. Twyla, welcome. And so today we're going to be talking Stephen Miller. and the shadow presidency, shadow dictatorship, shadow dickhead who's running the show and is the one who's pushing most of the racist and bigoted and disgusting policies that are coming out. Most of the hatred is through Stephen Miller. Hello, Lisa. How are you? And so I want to get into a little bit about him, discuss some backstory on Stephen, who he is, why he's the way he is, who he is, and what he is. And so do a little bit of a histrionics on him, and then we can talk about how we can continue to push back against Stephen Miller, because he is not the president. He is just a shadow, and he was not elected into office. He is the White House director of White House policy and personnel, I believe it is, right now, and he just kind of sucks. And so let me go back in time on some of my articles. I'm going to pull up two. We have discussed some of them a little bit. However, we're going to go into two different articles today about Mr. Miller and his disgusting hatred that he has for people, his self-loathing that has turned into vileness against other Americans, non-Americans, but people just in America in general. Oh, we're actually going to do three articles that we can go into today. So I will link into them. So we're going to get into some history on Stephen Miller. So I'm going to clip them. I'm going to drop them into the Substack chat, but I'm also going to pull it up as a window on the screen so you all can see what I'm talking about. And we'll just go through it. And so first, what we're going to do is we're going to go into this first one, which is, so it comes to Miller time. I was trying to play around with the name back then to catch some attention. This one is back from the election. All of these articles I wrote were either right before or right near the election. However, they still ring very true for what's going on and who they are and what's being talked about from them. You lived in the town he grew up in. Gross. That I'm sorry for you. Well, I'm not sorry for you. That sucks. It's a shame he had to stain your life by being in the same town as you. He's just a terrible human being. And yeah, so we'll get into that, Lisa. It's interesting how quickly he became radicalized at such a young age. But so this first one isn't about his young age itself. It's about something that he said during the election, which was America is for Americans and Americans only, which is a clear plagiarism of a German slogan of Germany is for Germans and Germans only. And that was from World War II or pre-World War II in the rise of Nazism and Goebbels and propaganda to bring about the fascist takeover of the German system. And so this was at the Madison Square Garden rally that was held right before the election that had all of the very reminiscent vibes of the German-American Bund rally that happened in the 1930s, pre-World War II, when the Nazi Party was trying to infiltrate and take over America pre-World War II. They had a big Madison Square Garden rally that was hyper patriotic, very larger than life, very similar in nature and themology to what we saw during the Trump Madison Square Garden rally and their echoes of fascism. And they did that for a reason. I've been saying now for a little while is that the new Republican Party that is currently going on is just a revitalization of the German American Fund, and it's changed itself because Nazism has been or had been eradicated in Germany for the most part. It moved back into America, and Stephen Miller is a big part of it coming to America. And he read all the speeches and the history of Germany and said, "Ooh, I like this. I want to do it." Yeah. So, Lisa, interesting that you say that about you had no idea a massive attempt of a fascist takeover during the U.S. during World War II. A lot of people really don't. One of the things we'll get into as through this, he might not be directly linked to it. However, there are a lot of parallels between the religious summer camps that are now taking over the U.S. and some of the Bible camps and things like that that are very German American Bund Nazi camp, like where it's very white Aryan camps and it's all about learning merit badges to shoot and to hunt and all of these very traditional skills. It's very conservative in nature. It's very propagandized and nationalistic. And you wouldn't be able to see it up front. Like you look at it and go, oh, Bible camp or whatever kind of camp. And then when nobody else is there, that's when they whip out the more aggressive pro Aryan or pro whatever they want to call it nowadays, Christo-fascist. But yeah, it harkens a lot to the German American Bund. If you want a good documentary on it for anyone, is watch the PBS. I think it's American Tales documentary series. There's one that's called an episode called Nazi Town, USA. And it talks about the German American Bund, specifically based in Idaho, because Idaho has always been a hotbed for neo Nazis and neo fascists. In a lot of areas, it's very, very, very white. It's very isolated. The laws are fairly favorable to any types of free speech without a lot of regulation on hate. And Idaho has a history of just Aryan nationalism throughout it. It's a very interesting area, and it's also very interesting that Idaho has been chosen as a place that they would establish a Qatari Air Force training base in the U.S. on U.S. soil to train F-15 pilots, but that's a different thing. Though I think Stephen may be linked in there somewhere as to moving it forward and pushing for it because he's very fashy, and a great way to manufacture a fascist takeover is manufacture a crisis and manufacture a terrorist event or manufacture an attack of some sort or an insider threat. And that's part of his playbook is to do that. Yeah. And Idaho is a wonderful place. I'm not knocking on Idaho in any way. I'm just saying, historically speaking, they have a very pro-Aryan residency in a lot of areas, and there's a lot of very beautiful other areas in Idaho that are not pro-Aryan or pro-Nazism. However, there's an interesting parallel there, and it's an interesting avenue that I'm going to look into more. I talk a lot about Pete Hegseth anyway, who is from Idaho. From Moscow, Idaho originally, and that's where his church is based out of. That's he's part of the Christ Kirk Church, which is a neo-fascist, Christo-fascist church. And so so to be clear, the plans dated back for a long time ago. I'm mad at anyone who thought this was a good idea. Democrat, Republican, Independent, anywhere in between, fascist, not fascist, progressive. If you thought putting a fucking foreign national airbase to train F-15 pilots on U.S. soil was a good idea, I think you're dumb. Yes, I understand we have treaties and policies with countries like France and the Philippines where we train soldiers, but they reside on U.S. bases. They don't have their own established foothold. Um, and that's a problem. But that's not for today's discussion. That is definitely something I'll be talking more and more about. It's just a dumbass move. It's a national security threat to both the U.S. and Canada because Qatar is known for money laundering and ties to terrorism, and that's all. Um, and that terrorism comes from any country, from Russia, from other Middle Eastern countries, from African countries, from European countries, from America, from North America and South American countries. Like that, the terrorism is not isolated to one group. I am not calling out any groups other than the terrorists that use Qatar and the oil money, the gold, the blood money, the black blood money that they have, because that's what it is it's just blood money and the crypto that they use to further finance themselves, because crypto doesn't have to be backed on anything. So they just make shit up and they have billions and billions of dollars and they flow money through there. Hamas was funded through Qatari networks or networks in Qatar. Like having a Qatari airbase in the U.S. is a bad idea. Is just bad because, and especially in Idaho where it is, because that exposes both Canada and the U.S. In a way that has never been done before. But let's get back to Stephen Miller and stick on this topic before I go too far on a tangent, because I don't have anyone to stop me on tangents. So I'll try and moderate myself a little bit on this. But so yeah, going back to Stephen Miller and the German-American Bund is you'll find a lot of symbolism and terminology that passes between the two. And so Stephen Miller is the prime example of that because he quotes Goebbels, he quotes other Nazis directly all of the time. He's not picky and choosy. He uses their words very deliberately. He uses Mussolini's phrases. He uses other fascist dictators from that time. And he uses that in English where most people don't actually know the speeches. They just hear about them. They just know that speeches happened. They just don't know the context of those speeches. So he uses them and he says all of the things like, the storm is coming. I am the storm. That was a Nazi terminology phrase to wipe out and otherize people. Like the terminology he uses is Nazi rhetoric at all times. That's who he is and that's what he is putting for. It's pretty on the nose for him. There's no hiding it. He does not use dog whistles. He does not silently put out his Nazism or his hate. He is very blunt and very open about it. He hates others. He hates all of us that are not in his little world. The thing with Stephen Miller is he's very malleable. He goes where he needs to because just like Trump, the one thing that matters most to Stephen Miller is Stephen Miller. Whereas Trump, it's Trump, but because Stephen Miller matters the most to himself, he is willing to do anything that Trump wants him to do or needs him to do or somebody else around them to implement his own goals and manipulate people because he's not dumb. He knows that Trump is failing. He's using him. He's using him as a prop in a lot of ways. This does not take culpability off of Trump himself. Trump is bad enough. He's a piece of shit. Twilight, yes, he is a Jewish Nazi. There were Jews in World War II who voted for the Nazi Party. They weren't Nazis at first. In their time, a lot of them voted because they thought they would have protections. They obeyed in advance, and they gave in and they gave up, and they didn't have any protections. Miller is what I'm referring to as an Abrahamic Nazi, um, because it's the Jews, it's the Catholics, it's the Christians, it's the Mormons, it's the other groups that are the Baptist organizations. There are a lot of groups that could be named that are super fundamentalist groups that are trying to bring about the Abrahamic end times and the apocalypse and revelations. Like, this is what they want. They want the end time. For Miller, it's not so much because he wants to die. He doesn't want to die. He wants to cull the population down so that he can be in charge, so that his ideas reign supreme. Because Miller has a lot of vested interest in staying alive for himself. He loves himself. He also knows that if he gets what he wants, he thinks he can sit comfortably. Um, is fundamentalist evangelical? No, not quite. Um, that's a that is a good question, Nicole. Short answer is evangelicals are people who evangelize for their religion. So they go out and they talk to people about their religion, and part of it is in the hopes that you may join. Um, some of it is in the hopes just to spread the message. There are different types of evangelicals, though. There are fundamentalist evangelicals who are the far right. They are the ones who evangelize or come to and try and spread their word violently. That's what it means more to be a fundamentalist, is you're violently for your story of evangelizing. So it's either you become part of the system or you are not, or you're an other. Whereas an evangelical can, like Tim Whitaker, be someone who talks about Jesus, lives a radically Jesus lifestyle, pro Jesus lifestyle, where he helps the poor. He works for uh, people who are in need. So it's more about the fundamentalist part than the evangelizing part, because you can evangelize without being hateful. Like Tim Whitaker and the New Evangelicals, the organization he helps run, are evangelicals who aren't forcing you to convert. They don't want to force you. They just want to educate you. And if you convert or if you accept God, then cool, good. If you don't, cool, good. You're still okay. We've taught you something and you've made a logical choice on your own. We're just going to teach you. The fundamentalist part is the radical violence. And that's where Stephen Miller is. He's a fundamentalist Abrahamic Nazi. Um, it's well, yes and no, Nicole. So the question is: so then, do evangelicals support the Israeli government, or is it fundamentalists? It's predominantly fundamentalists that support what the Israeli government is currently doing in the genocide that is going on in Palestine, and evangelicals, some of them do support because they are also fundamentalists. But there's others who support Israel, like, and who are evangelicals, but don't support what Israel is currently doing. Um, and just like I support the US, but I do not support our government because our government is corrupt as fuck and our government is taking down the country. But we can separate the US from the government from the people. And just like I can separate, and most and everyone here can separate the Israeli government from Israelis, who there are plenty of Israelis who don't want to continue to colonize and expand and genocide people. But there's also a very vocal group in Israel that does. And they're the ones in charge and they're the ones murdering people. Whereas, just like in America, the fundamentalists are the ones who are radically extreme and going out and killing people, radically extreme and want to bring about the end times through dominionism and destruction of our ways in this world. And one of those is people like Stephen Miller or Russell Vogt, I guess is his actual last name. Um, yeah, more traditional, hyper traditionalist. And it's not even tradition, actually. I would say hyper mythologist because it's based on a mythology of Christianity. It's not actually based on what Christianity teaches. Um, it's more about greed, power, and violence than anything else. Um, the reason fundamentalists are used by fascist groups is because fundamentalists are predominantly more likely to go along with somebody who claims to have power and control. They want to be told what to do. They want to be told an easy way. So the ultra conservative idea that they believe in is really, I just want to be told what to do so that I don't really have to think and I can just go about living, even if that life doesn't mean anything or do anything, as long as it's easy for me to get by and I don't have to make many choices. Like, I don't have to think about who our allies are. I don't have to think about these things. They want a strong man. And roughly 28 to 30% of a population fits into that category. And that's where we're at right now. Is we've got about 28 to 30% of the US population, at least voting population, that agrees with this, or voters that agree with this. Um, yeah, so I don't have to think means easy to create dog whistles. Yes, because they can take ideas like America is for Americans and Americans only, and to somebody who doesn't want to have to think about it and hears, oh, violent criminals are all coming from either the left and they're propagandized into it. Like, we this is all cult mentality. Like, Stephen Miller is a cult propagandist. So he tells you what to do and gives you the dog whistles or the bullhorn in this case. And then what his words then get filtered out into more dog whistly sounding things that others talk about. So Miller is like the hyper propagandist. He says all this stuff really, really, really bluntly and loudly. Um, and then Fox News repeats it, or other networks like RSBN or others go, they take it and they water it down and slightly dumb it down a little bit. And it's black and white with zero gray. It's good or evil, nowhere in between. It's law or it's anarchy. There's no middle ground. For them, it's it's a very conveniently simple way to live your life, but it's also very oppressive because you just let other people tell you what to do. These people a lot of them are also either broken into it through abuse or indoctrination, but it's very propagandized and it's very based around hate and grievances. So this is all about a grievance structure. It's the fascist playbook. They're literally taking it and going step by step. Um, so we're going to move next into continuing on all of the Miller stuff. But let's talk a little bit about Miller's backstory um, before we get further into some of the more recent propaganda that he's gone on. So I'm going to switch over to our next one, which is it's Stephen Miller time. This is part one. Part two overall in the Stephen Miller saga, but part one in this piece this is about the story before and where his family came from. They are a very common story for Jewish migration into the U.S. due to being pushed out of other countries. His family follows a very similar path to parts of my family. His family was born into from Belarus, or what would have been modern day Belarus. They are Ashkenazi Jews. Um, they came over to the U.S. Um, during the anti-Jewish pogroms and the Bolshevik Revolution time area. They emigrated through Ellis Island and then found their way into Pennsylvania. Let's pull it up. Into Johnstown, Pennsylvania. So the story really is about his maternal great great grandfather, Wolflie Glotzen or Glosser. Um, Glotzen was born in 1858, died in 1927, emigrated through Ellis Island in New York, and then, like I said, the family settled in Johnstown, PA. The Glotzer family founded a successful enterprise in a coal capital, where they actually built a department store. They were one of the first department store companies out there, and it was a very successful business. Um, Many people who grew up in the 60s and 70s in the New England area probably knew about a Glosser style department store. There were the GB department stores, which was like a discount, almost like a Dollar General style um, store. And he expanded throughout the US. It was bought by Value City after it went into bankruptcy in 1992. So the business lasted for almost two generations. It was quite a long business. And this is sort of where some of the issues really started for Miller, for Stephen himself, was the Glotzer family was a mix of reform and conservative temple areas. We're in a mix of a reform, which is more moderate to progressive, and conservative temples. His family was more on the conservative side, and his family overall was part of the philanthropic community in the area. They did a lot. It's a very good family overall. There are a lot of his family at this point have denounced him for what he is doing and the acts that he's taking and the things that he's saying and who he is. But as the coal town fell and the business going into bankruptcy, that was really when Miller had to move, and the town and the family had to leave, and they moved from the Rust Belt and found themselves moving to Florida and California, and so it went from the Rust Belt to the golden waves of amber grain in California, and Stephen Miller hated it. He hated it because he went from a life, in the end, he went from a life of luxury and higher class than others to living in a community that was predominantly Hispanic. And for him, that was him moving to the others. He was living with the others. He was living with the help. He was living with the servant class, those who don't deserve his attention or his sympathy in any way. Um, and so he grew up to be radical overall. He's not a conservative. And this one of the things I argue in this piece, or at least to myself, is he's not conservative. He's a radical, because conservatives actually want to conserve something. Radicals just want to tear things down and break them. He's a destructive radical, not a progressive radical, or a regressive radical, I guess would be the better term, because he wants to regress and he wants to demolish things. But yeah, so he's an elitist prick. He's an elitist piece of shit. He thinks of himself as better than the others around him. He grew up seeing himself as higher and mightier than others in his community. Um, and when his family lost a lot of their wealth, he they fell pegs within the ladder of success, and being white and falling is hard. Being white and Jewish and falling can be even harder, because we have a lot of stereotypes in the Jewish community that are really detrimental as well to ourselves and others. And it's about, there's a lot of the idea of wealth and greed and money, very anti-Semitic stereotypes, but some stereotypes do base from reality, in that a lot of Jewish families tended to be wealthier. They tended to be very successful at their businesses. Um, they had some inherited wealth in places, but they were just it was just a it's a terrible stereotype, but it leads to a lot of hatred, because especially for people like Miller, who internalized the stereotype, and then guilt, and then he built himself guilt out of all of it. Is somehow he became the victim in everything. And so from a young age, Miller was always fairly radical, even as a high schooler and middle schooler. So when he got radicalized was at an early age, um, by listening to folks in the extreme right-wing media sphere, influencing from people like Wayne LaPierre, Rush Limbaugh, and David Horowitz. And David Horowitz is described by the Southern Poverty Law Center as an anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant extremist. Radicalization began when he read Wayne LaPierre, then CEO of the NRA, book entitled Guns, Crime, and Freedom. And Wayne LaPierre radicalized a lot of people. And the NRA was a backdoor for a lot of Russian money into the US. And so a lot of Russian influence has come through the NRA. So it doesn't surprise me that Miller, or it didn't surprise me that Miller was radicalized through folks like the NRA, because because it it spoke to him and the grievance structure, and the the idea that he was a victim and he needed to protect himself at all times by being a bully. That's really what the NRA message has turned into in a lot of ways, in my opinion. But it was all fun. A lot of it was funded through Russian money. And so inadvertently, at the time, anyways, well, LaPierre was actually recently indicted in New York, I think, by Letitia James. I believe it was a civil case where he got sued for a shitload of money and removed from the board of the NRA. And so they have, like, states are holding the NRA accountable, but the federal government isn't really doing anything, because they refuse to deem groups like this as hate groups or terrorist groups or indoctrination centers and things like that. And so after the LaPierre introduction and the NRA radicalization, it was a chain of events through his teens that led to his appearances on a conservative talk radio, writing letters to local papers criticizing the high school's response to the September 11th attacks. And when I say criticizing, he didn't think they went far enough in their messaging, and he was wanting more hatred out of it. He really wanted it to be about anti-Muslim rhetoric. Miller has played a big role in keeping alive the anti-Muslim and building anti-Semitism in the U.S. And Islamophobia and painting a target on other Jewish people's backs because of his greed and his grievances. But he didn't, as a kid, he didn't think they went far enough in condemning the attacks. And he fomented false victimhood by inviting controversial activists to Duke University, and then got mad when the university didn't allow the activists to speak. And so he pushes the bounds, which is why I say he's a radical and not a conservative. It's because he pushes the bounds further than they should be pushed or need to be pushed, and he sees what he can get away with, which is where we see what Trump does. Is Trump will push as hard as he can on certain issues to see how far he can go, and then he'll go back when he gets caught. If he gets caught for something, he steps back a little bit. And so that's where that mentality comes from. For Stephen, it's the same type of mentality. He pushes his rhetoric and how far he can go to get punished with it. His purpose is to see when he'll get punished so that he can whine and complain. It's the false victimhood of most fundamentalists, that they play victim to something so that they can grift off of it and get attention, because they're not good at making ideas, so they can only do things that are attacking and tearing down others. So he's a small man. He's just a small person. He's a bully who never got bullied enough back to in the right way to show him that what he was doing was wrong. Instead, he got rewarded for his victimhood by people, and he got a lot of information like back. So for him, negative attention is the reward. He never grew out of that phase. He just wants the attention, whether it's good or bad. And so he uses provocative things like controversial activists at a university that is not going to allow that activist on because, say, they are a hate speech, and universities have free speech policies around hate speech and protecting their students. Duke was never going to allow this person to come, and he did it just to get attention, which is petty as shit. And then while he was at Duke, he met famous or infamous one of the original alt-right right-wingers, Richard Spencer. He's the one who coined the term alt-right, which is the pipeline that we are all now familiar with, that pushes people towards the extremism. It's pipelines in chat rooms and Discord servers or on 4chan or in your video games when kids are playing and they're in it, or watching a Twitch stream and somebody's just rambling for hours and hours and hours, and you're not really noticing what they're talking about until at some point people in the chats are comfortable enough saying hate words, or they go into groups and the whole point is to see who can be the most extreme, and you get rewarded for things like that. And that's where Nick Fuentes comes from, and the Groyper movement, and Laura Loomer and her Groyper movement. And you get people like that who grift off of extremism and have created this funnel towards the alt-right. And it's built on that system of grievance and ease. Is I'm aggrieved. Basically, the message is I'm upset because I don't have all of the opportunities handed to me. And because I act like a child, I get mad when somebody says no. And yeah, it's interesting because Courtney, you put good point out there. Is it's so interesting to hear teens talk about the alt-right pipeline. The ones who know what to look for are full of valuable knowledge. Until they're an adult or have permission and are with an adult, and however that works, I won't talk to anyone like that, at least publicly. but I will see if I can get some information from folks I know who are a little bit younger. I know Centered America is a great place to talk that talk about this and the grievance structure and getting away from it. And one of the big things that we've seen built out of this grievance structure um, is Turning Point USA. Is an organization that is built basically on the alt right pipeline. It's a grievance structure um, against people. It fundraises on hate and grift and eat, but it also gives them the backbone of ease of God will have your back in this, or don't worry, Donald Trump is the anointed of God, or Stephen Miller is the anointed of God, or Pete Hegseth is the anointed, and Pam Bondi are the anointed. So they know what they're talking about. Or Russell Vogt is the anointed. So they know what they're talking about, and God put them there, and I'm just going to trust in God's plan. And I'm just going to trust in Stephen Miller's plan. I'm going to just trust in Donald Trump's plan or Russell Vogt's plan. And that's what the pipeline leads to, is just trust in a single person who is infallible in their eyes, or um, is a Cyrus figure or someone like that they can prop up. And Stephen Miller is one of the best at doing this because he is as gross and disgusting as he is. He's also fairly eloquent, and is able to talk, and he knows how to use his oratory skills, and he knows how to orate, and he knows how to communicate very effectively. Um, but the most obvious terms I can use talking about Miller are arrogant and incredibly intolerant. Um, is He believes that his views are the only right ones, and like we we started this with, is he is the shadow president. He is the one dictating policy. He is the head of White House policy and personnel, um, and he decides what policy is going to um, like be put out to the president. He puts together a lot of the executive orders and reads them to the president. He probably uses the auto pen to sign for the president all of the time, because every accusation is a confession with these fascists. They tell us what they're doing, they just tell us that it's somebody else who's doing it. And we need to stop believing them. We need to just stand up for ourselves and go, yeah, no, that's not true. You're doing it. Um, and I think we're at the point where we can do that. I think we can easily point to certain people and go, no, you're the one who is causing the madness. You're the one who is proposing these things. You are the one grifting. Um, and Stephen Miller can be put out of the discussion, but right now he's driving the discussion. He is driving the um, violent policy and rhetoric that is ongoing now. So, all of this, why we talked about all of this in the back, to familiarize you with some of Stephen Miller's history, is because he is the chief of White House policy and staff, basically, he gets to choose who is around the president. He gets to choose what is being written for the president to look at. He gets to basically copy what is put together for them in Project 2025 with the help of Russell Vought to enact the policy. And he's the chief propagandist. His job is to incite. His job is to incite hatred, to incite radicalism, to incite violence, to incite, to just make people mad and put things out there, but say what they're going to do so that it can then be disseminated through the ranks. So he's the chief propagandist. He's the one who puts all this information together. Um, and a lot of people believe it because it's convenient. It's convenient information for them. They can latch on to simple things. It's why simple phrases work so well. It's why MAGA caught on, Make America Great Again. Also because it sounds and looks like mega. Um, like they're very good at the word choices that they use. It's why during the election, when people started questioning things that were happening, use and like questioning the election results, the words blue anon started showing up because nobody wanted to be associated with QAnon. And yet, asking basic questions on election integrity is rather important, because that's a basic fundamental principle of a democracy. They just radicalized it and propagandized it. So Stephen Miller, and why he's so important now, is because he is driving the push towards the Insurrection Act. He is the one who is pushing that the hardest. That is what he wants. He wants the Insurrection Act invoked because then he gets plenary powers, or absolute power, because he said it, even on accident. He said what the goal is to get absolute power. So plenary powers is the powers to do anything they want as a dictator or as a single individual or as the office of the president. Whoever manages or controls the office of the president is the plenary power and gets to do whatever the fuck they want. That's what he believes in. That's what he's pushing for. Um, and so while doing all of this, while he is the policy director, while he is managing the White House staff, he also has quite a bit of investments in Palantir. And this is one of the reasons I bring him up on this discussion for Palantalk overall, is because he is closely linked to Palantir itself. He invests in them. He has a very large stock portfolio with Palantir and Palantir associated companies, and he helped drive the policy to get ICE a juicy contract to Palantir to create the surveillance state. So he has a financially vested interest in Palantir owning the internal security and um, destruction state. Like that's his whole goal is to be the one in charge, is to own all of the things and to be able to create the policy or dictate the policy from behind the scenes so that he's never in the spotlight. Like we see Miller occasionally, but there's very little, we don't always see him. We see him on deliberate events when he gives his propaganda. We don't ever see Russell vote. Um, but we hear them all the time. The policies that they drive are driven through Project 2025 decision making and the money financing behind all of, and the whatever financial backings they have there. The black, the sorry, the dark money networks, that they have, where crypto and other non-tangible assets are being used to finance and pay for things. The reason why they're crashing the US economy the way they are. Stephen Miller is driving a lot of this. He's the voice behind the policy. He is the rhetoric that wants to label all people who are on the left as terrorists, as insurrectionists. And he wants to pollute those words further so that when they're used for real, when we charge these people with treason and insurrection, when accountability does happen, their goal is to try and pollute those words and change their meanings. Because to them, truth is what they make it. They're the thought police. He wants to be able to dictate what is legal and illegal and become the thought police, and then have his surveillance state surveil you and tell you whether or not you comply with it. And if you don't, well, there's always a train, a boat, or a plane that you can disappear on. Um, yeah, and it's the fight for who is actually in charge of um, the the fascist group is probably not a single individual. Um, I don't so much know if Miller or Teal want or Vogt or Elon or Curtis Yarvin or Mark Andreessen or anyone of that boat really want to be the single person in charge. I think they want like a brain trust conglomerate of themselves, almost their little board of directors for humanity. Um, is I think he just wants to be a part of that and not so much the one always in charge. Um, and this comes with too is Miller is in charge of a lot of the government. He basically runs the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, um, the Justice Department. Um, he runs a majority of the U.S. government in a lot of ways. And he's the one who is poisoning words such as terrorism, insurrection, labeling. He's finding an other to label that's a larger group so that they can justify attacking people on the left. Um, and it's arrogance, it's a god personality, it's that Napoleon complex, but in general it's the authoritarian complex of neo-fascism and narcissism mixed together, and this idea of wanting and needing power, control, and using grievance. That's a grift. He's a grifter. His life has not been difficult. He has not lived a hard life. Stephen Miller has not had to face adversity. The thing is, these people see adversity as taking away from them because they believe they are due everything. Whereas the rest of us believe we have to work and learn and grow to get the things that we want. And we have to work for them. And it requires sacrifice and investment and time and energy. And they don't want to do that. That's hard work. That's for other people to do. They just want to live off the benefits of the hard work. They just want the easy way. They want somebody to tell them what to do. They want the thought police to tell them, hey, you don't think that because that's bad, because those people are bad. So we don't like them. Um, and Miller uses things like the America First legal group to create the illusion of legitimacy. Stephen Miller is not a lawyer. He's not a bar licensed lawyer. Um, Yet he founded a group that does amicus briefs and does legal briefings, and drives a it's a right wing, far right think tank, um, that yeah he directs others to do the digging. He tells people what to do so that, or what the overarching goal is, so that they can stay on message, and so that that message can then flourish into incitement, like Brian Kilmeade on Fox News advocating for killing homeless people is a chain that has linked back to people like Stephen Miller and their use of violent rhetoric and incredible incitement levels and hatred, because it then lets other people who are more closeted about their hatred say things out loud. Because Brian Kilmeade would have never said what he said on Fox News had he not said that at home more than once or in private more than once. You do not feel comfortable saying that type of hate in front of people unless you're practiced at it. And so these people practice at it. Um, Stephen Miller works hard for his hatred. He's one of the ones who doesn't actually, that's why he doesn't want to be on the bottom. He sees himself above others. So he works for his hatred, but he makes the structure so that others can just be lazy. Um, yeah, he's the kind of person and behavior this regime has empowered, just like pedophiles are much more common. Like 99% of pedophiles are Republican far right, typically more conservative Republicans, but they are, and over the last years have been basically all Republicans because the permission structure for those types of behaviors are built into the system. They're built in. Stephen Miller and Donald Trump and Don Jr. and Eric Trump and Ivanka Trump and Jared Miller and or Jared Kushner, Stephen Miller, Pete Hegseth, even JD Vance are all empowered by this type of behavior because those around them in power also do these things. Those around them and before them also did these things. And so they don't see what they're doing as bad because they just want the attention, and they know that if they've been over time given the reinforcement that what they do, no matter how negative it sounds or atrocious it can be, because it's only destructive, they get rewarded for it. And the thing is, though, they don't actually bond with each other. Well, yes, they do. They form a mutual bond and fellowship, but they don't like each other in any ways. Most of these fascist groups don't like each other. And in fact, they're the ones who are most likely to get impacted by fascism first. When it starts coming for those that look like themselves, because it requires full loyalty and a full purge of non-believers before you can truly have a takeover in that way. And then they can they're going to keep fighting each other because each one of them has a slightly different view on the fascism. But yeah, they bond. They definitely bonded over hating other people. Yeah, they don't like anyone. They don't like themselves, let alone each other. So they hate everything. Their whole lives are about hate and misery because they got told no once, or they got laughed at once, or they didn't get a birthday present, or they didn't get enough hugs as a kid, or whatever excuse it may be, is they just hate people. They found it the easiest thing to do. They were taught that they could hate, and they could hate with others, and that they could hate openly and loudly and proudly, and that any time that something bad happened in their life was because of somebody else and not them. Stephen Miller, his family went out of business. Their family business went out, and they lost status. And losing status in America is really tough. It hits really hard because there's not a very good in between wealthy and not in this country. It's pretty extreme. And his family went from wealthy to not, to just a normal middle class family, maybe a lower middle class family. And it was somebody else's fault. It had to be somebody else's fault. It wasn't their fault. It wasn't his fault. It was always somebody else's fault. And so instead of doing the adult thing as he got older, and asking questions and wondering what happened and learning truths, he just lived in that grievance structure. And he built an ego around grievance and what it means to be aggrieved or in like just attacked by other people. And so Stephen Miller's just, he is the essence of grievance. Like at the end of the day, that's really what he is. He also, like I said, is very powerful and offers a lot of policy. And so we always like to end some of the Palantalks before I go into our final segment, is with a little bit of action and what you can do and activism and how you can support, or doing things like minimizing your metadata, how you can maximize your impact in doing stuff. Is Stephen Miller is the worst fucking kind of person out there. So I'm going to give you a call to action because I heard it on, I think it was the Find Out podcast. I think it was Chris Goldsmith who said this would be a great idea. and I believe him. Chris and I get along really well. He's been on more than one of our shows, but what he said was Stephen Miller likes his image the way it is of this tough, evil, bad guy who, even after the plenary power slip on CNN, where CNN then tried to actively edit that video, thank God for, you know, the internet living forever. Was the video was out there when he said plenary powers, and then they put out an edit where it wasn't there in that speech because that's good journalistic practice. Thanks, CNN. We should sue the fuck out of you. Unlike what Donald Trump sued for, this would be a real lawsuit because you fucking altered the truth to make it so that Stephen Miller didn't say something he did say on national TV, which is they want absolute authority. So fuck you, CNN, and fuck you, Stephen Miller. But the call to action that Chris Goldsmith said was use No Kings as an opportunity. Let's use No Kings as an opportunity to call out Stephen Miller because Stephen has this reputation that he likes to uphold. Like I said, the big whatever reputation he has for looking like a worm. Like, I mean, he looks like a worm, and he looks like a golem style worm. So Chris Goldsmith said he encourages some protesters to go out and make the Gollum King protest signs with Stephen Miller's face imposed over Gollum, or on just let's use Gollum. We'll stay with that. And yes, people might associate that with halflings and with the idea of fake anti-Semitism because people made up anti-Semitism about J.R.R. Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings and the Middle Earth verse is Gollum is a great representation of Stephen Miller. He was a greedy piece of shit as an individual, and all he wanted was his precious ring, his precious power, his Stephen Miller is the Gollum King. So I'd like to see a couple of y'all putting Gollum King signs together for your protest signs. And let's get that on national TV and take some pictures. And if you do have a protest sign with the Gollum King on it, send it to me on Substack, or send it to Banner and Backbone on Substack. And with your permission, we will give you the credit for it on who you are. If you want to, we'll post it. But we'll please provide send us the photo and then give written consent that you'd like to have it posted with or without your name on it, credited to you. I'd love to see a whole bunch of Gollum King signs out there, and we'll just put it out into the Substack first, and then into Twitter and Blue Sky and Reddit and all of them. And we'll see if we can make a Gollum King out of this because he sucks and he deserves it. And nobody gets to take away our right to free speech. Nobody gets to tell me that my peaceful and patriotic speech is terroristic and disgusting when it's not, because we advocate strongly and only ever for peaceful and patriotic activism. Nothing else. Peacefully and patriotically. I will say that until the end, unless there is no other choice, and then there better never come a time when we have to get to that no other choice. Like, peaceful and patriotic is how you win movements, is how we win. It's peaceful and patriotic. The longer we're peaceful, the more patriotic we are, the better chance we have of winning. So go use this chance this weekend for No Kings Rally on Saturday the 18th to show your patriotism, bring out your flags, wear patriotic attire, bring out signs that have Stephen Miller as the Gollum King, and making sure it's very obvious who it is they're talking about. Get out your taco signs. Do whatever you want for a sign, but make sure it's peaceful and patriotic, and it bullies the bully for their ideas, not their personhood. Do not bully somebody about their personhood. That means, like, we don't go after Mike Johnson if he's possibly gay. That doesn't matter. Peter Thiel is gay. That doesn't matter. He is on the Epstein list and has been to the Epstein Island and has met with Epstein, or was, it looked like he had met with Epstein more than once when he knew that Epstein was a pedophile. So it's pretty easy to just say Peter Thiel is a gross person who is probably a pedophile, and it's about power and control, and it's not about sexuality. So just because they're straight or gay, we don't attack person. We attack personality traits. We can attack bad ideas. That's how you properly bully a bully. Is you bully their ideas and not their personhood, because they're hurting as a person and they're taking that anger out on other people. But if you can break the idea itself and show them and without hurting them, without telling them that they personally suck, you go a long way. Yeah, and do things like frog costumes and unicorns and dinosaurs, but bring out your American flags. If you don't have one, go buy one. If you don't have one, go buy one, and then go buy some small ones to hand out to other people. I do it every time I go, and I'll buy a couple packs of small American flags for other people to hand out for the parade or for walking down the protest, so that everyone has one. Because the more flags there are, the harder it is for them to shoot at you or to attack you, because it will hit the news if they attack a group of people, especially if you're white. Go out with your American flags, go out with your suit. You like, show up patriotic, bring an Uncle Sam suit, wear your Uncle Sam attire that you'd wear for the 4th of July. Be that person. Be the person who is patriotic and shows it. Reclaim our flag, reclaim our patriotism. We have to reclaim all of them, but we can reclaim a lot of them. So with that call to action and call to remembrance of what we can and should do for our No King's Day, we're going to shift to the final 15 minutes of the show. Yeah, flags made not in China if possible. Like, where you can, try and buy American made for flags, but check out the stores first. Ensure that you're buying from a reputable salesperson and not somebody who is ultra MAGA or owned by a MAGA corporation, because buying American isn't the only thing. It's buying Americans who are not fascism. So spend your money wisely, use it in the right places. Don't give money to fascists. And always be there to remember your patriotism and show your patriotism and take it back from these people. It's what I do every time. I wear a patriotic Arkansas shirt with red, white, and blue. Doesn't really have the flag, but it's got the colors. It's got a big old giant eagle on it. It says Arkansas. I wave my American flag. Later in this week too, we'll have a discussion with Senator America around protest and rally prep and safety tips and how to be properly ready in case of emergencies. Also, how do you respond if people are trying to escalate, and what good tactics are. So we're going to talk to Senator America. They have a really good set of guides on things to do. But I want you to remember is go bold. Be bold, be boldly patriotic, go bold out there and live the American dream, which is to dissent from a tyrannical government, and go boldly into space for now so that we can move into our final little segment, which is the space talk, which is where we leave politics behind for a little while. Normally, I would have Shane here with me, and we like to discuss some cool topics or some really neat stuff that we've found, or just things that we really like about space. and different stuff. If you couldn't tell, I really like space. There's a lot of stuff in my background that is fairly space oriented. Um, Actually, instead of showing other stuff, I'll show off my stuff. So this one is not really about space, not that I know of, but this is a painting that I have from when I was in college. I did a summer cleaning. Let me get back. I did a summer helping clean the art studio at Carnegie Mellon. And I did not realize, so I went to Carnegie Mellon University. I originally studied music theory and composition. So I'm a classically trained musician. And if you didn't know, most musicians, especially in college, were broke or are broke. And so I picked up whatever jobs I could. And so when I was at school, I think it was between my junior and senior year, I stayed and worked a couple jobs during the summer. And one of them was I worked in the art studio, cleaning the art studio for the next school year. What I didn't realize was some of the students leave behind their artwork and don't bring it with them when they're done, or don't take it home, or they just scrap them. And the university allows, if you're working there or helping, is if the artwork is there by the end, it's still there before the next school year starts, you can take it. It's free. It's free to take, and nobody is going to say no. And so I took a couple pieces, and this one's one of my favorites. It reminds me of space. To me, it looks like galaxy clusters, and almost like a James Webb photo nowadays, where it's got all the different galaxy clusters bursting over each other, the layers of light and the stars in the background. So that was one of my favorite paintings I've ever picked up and seen. So yeah, I guess I'll answer a question while we're on our space talk. Is about Courtney, you asked, classically trained musician too. You're like an onion with all your layers. And yes, I am a classically trained musician. That was what I originally wanted to do. Keeping it on the space theme, is I grew up watching Star Wars and Star Trek. Yeah, I don't actually know if it is a space painting though, but it is really cool. I think it is. I think it's space, and the great thing about art is, as long as it's somewhat abstract, it can easily be multiple meanings. And I hope whoever painted this painting maybe is watching one day and sees the artwork and goes, "Oh, I remember painting that." And if they do, I'd love to let them claim their art, or at least let me give them note for it, or like a link for them around it, because I love this piece. But yeah, it feels deep. There's a depth to it. I was going somewhere. Oh yeah, with the music, was my love of space started really early when I was a kid. Is my brother and I? Yes, credit. Thank you, Beth. Words are hard. For someone who talks a lot, words are hard. Is I watched the Star Wars movies on VHS until we wore through the VHSs. My brother and I wore through a set of the VHSs for the original 3 Star Wars movies on our own. And and so I fell in love with space, and I wanted to write music for movies and video games. And some of the most influential pieces that I listened to on a classical side were from movies or video games. Like the Halo theme song is one of the most iconic themes that people know. The Star Wars theme song is the most iconic theme song. Like, you can ask anyone to start singing a Star Wars theme song, and they'll probably give you the Imperial March or the Rebel for the New Hope, for the Rebel Alliance. Like people know the pieces, or if you go to the new movies with Phantom of the Menace, with the when they're doing the lightsaber duel on Naboo, and Darth Maul is there, and the big old operatic background going on is amazing. Good, John, smart. Yeah, I wouldn't have let Shane play with them either. He looks like someone who would play with the dolls and actually use them, and then they break over time because he'd get a lot of use out of them. It's like I've got those ones up there that I don't ever let the kids touch, but they are out of the box. But they were gifts to me. But yeah, eventually you'll get. I saw a comment in there is we would love to, or from Monica, if you are ever so inclined, I would love to hear you play an instrument of choice. Yeah, I could do that at some point. I'm actually a vocalist. That was my training. I did 4 years of private voice lessons through high school and college, maybe 5. And yeah, and I that was my instrument of choice overall. But I do play the saxophone. I have a Navajo wood flute, a Hawaiian wood flute, or bamboo flute, couple clarinets. I know how to play most woodwind instruments because as part of my training, they actually teach you how to be a music teacher. It's called musicology. And they teach you the fundamentals of each instrument, and I never picked up the brass instruments, but I could do woodwind. I liked playing jazz a lot when I was on the bari sax, but for singing, I'm a baritone to a bass, somewhere in between, and so I find I do like some classical, a decent amount of classical music and classical like solo pieces. There's a lot of really good baritone music out there, especially American. Um, like classical, like Ray Vaughan Williams is an artist that, or a composer that I like because he wrote for my voice range pretty well, without having to change keys. It was the original range for it. But yeah, I trained on my voice, and I'm glad I did because it taught me how to speak really clearly and enunciate. And I had to go and diction, and it helps me speak clearly so that I can say what I need to without always bumbling over my words, but also I can like read through my poetry. And that's what's led to a lot of the work that I do on the Sick of This Shit publication side is the poetry piece. Is I took the music and turned it into poetry. And I've actually, Monica, to play on what you just said, which is a singing Nick poem would be beautiful. So I've actually turned a couple of my grandfather's poems into pieces that I have recorded. And so I have done that before. Is turned poetry into music, never my own, but from my family. And so you guys may get to hear me sing at some point. I did a really bad Trump impersonation doing the Pokemon theme song, but re-entitling it as the Pedomon theme song a while back. You can catch that on Gen X's. It was a Saturday special with Dana Dubois and Lawrence Winterman. But yeah, it's something that I enjoy doing a lot in the background. I sing a lot of rock music. Is really what I do, and because I can get into the heavy metal, they tend to be a little bit lower often on their vocal ranges. Some of them are higher, but a lot are lower. So yeah. will you sing live for us the day Trump leaves office? On the day that we wake up and get the news, then I will. I think I could do that. I could go live for that. Maybe I'll sing Hallelujah, um, or even fucking the American anthem at that point, and do our national anthem. Give him a proper send off that we no longer need him. Um, but yeah, I could do something like that. Blaring Stormtrooper, yeah, maybe. But the problem is the people going back into the Stormtrooper side. We'll loop this back into Star Wars. Great comment, Gory. I appreciate it. Is the Imperial March music and the Stormtrooper music is these people found themselves agreeing with the Empire. They saw Star Wars and they see themselves, the Empire, as the heroes, and the Rebel Alliance are the villains who are being terrorists and who are taking on the poor Empire and killed all those poor stormtroopers in the space station in the Death Star when it blew up twice. Um, all those poor innocent lives lost of this oppression of this oppressive spanning galactic regime, and the Jedi are just these old crazy hermits that are just nuts, and they're like the hippies who took too many drugs and are just sitting there tripping balls and telling you you can move shit with your mind, bro. You can convince people that you can do things. Like you can make people better. That's all the Jedi's are. Whereas the dark side is we'll make it better for you. We'll just tell you what to do and it'll be better. And that's it. That's all. Yeah, Yoda is so woke, Tara. Yeah, exactly, Tara. Yoda is woke. Also, the Mandalorians are woke as fuck because they took in and helped. As I walk away from my microphone, they took in and helped people. So we have Commander Cody, who is also woke as fuck, because he is a clone trooper who became more than his clone, more than who he could be, more than the Fett, more than Jango and Boba Fett, who was also a clone who did not become more than he could be. He came exactly who he was supposed to be. And that sort of shows you the difference between a clone in this story and like is the parallel is the clones that became more were the ones who took on fascism, that questioned, that didn't accept that they just had to be what they were told they needed to be. They went beyond. They stepped out of their role and they realized they could be something more than the work that they were required to do or the killing that they were required to do. And that's what made them special. That's why they were different. That's why Star Wars is so amazing, is because they give you those moments, see the underlying truth being brought out from people who you wouldn't expect it from. You wouldn't think that a clone trooper would go and save the village that they were supposed to destroy or save a child of a rebel terrorist. Um, and that is the parallel to Nazism. Like that is the parallel to hiding people under your bed or hiding people in your closet or under your floorboards or in your Chicago apartment under your bed for a kid who made from ice because they're afraid that they're going to take this American child who's just a child. That literally happened in the Star Wars movies. And we all went, ooh, that's bad. The people who went, ooh, we like this, they're the ones who are in charge. That's the Stephen Millers. That's the Donald Trumps. That's all of what's going on right now. And that's where we come back from space. Unfortunately, we have to leave space and return to Palantalk to end our day and to let everyone have their afternoon, and stop worrying about technofascism for a little while and Stephen Miller. But go out and be active and go out and register for No Kings, and then go show up and bring your King of the Golem sign or Golem King, and make sure that it's there. Make a sign with a giant earthworm equals Stephen Miller, and put his face on an earthworm, or whatever you want. Shame him. Make something stupid out of him, um, and have some fun with it. Go wear your frog suit. Go be an American and go have fun and protest. Um, and we'll see you again next week. You guys can find me here on, which one is it? This one? Oh, you can find me here on Banner and Backbone. Come subscribe to the network. We are rapidly growing and continuing to build out our offerings, as well as stabilizing more shows and getting more tech build up like we have here with some of the additional features. So please come support Banner and Backbone. And thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate you all joining in on a Monday afternoon. I will be back next week with Shane Yirak for our normally scheduled Palantalk. We will probably continue discussing Stephen Miller some more, but I think we're going to move into some of the actual tech folks that maybe lead in Russell Vogt, and how they fit into this surveillance state. And so be safe, be prepared, but be active, and don't hide, don't shelter yourself, minimize your metadata, shut down some of your cookies, go enjoy life, make some different routes, go be a little bit chaotic, but always be peaceful and patriotic. Go put a cog in their system and ruin the algorithms, because that's what it's all about. Go be a little chaos agent and have some fun, everyone. So I'll see you next week after this coming No Kings Rally. Stay safe, stay together. Yep, just like Tara says, stay safe, everyone. We stick together, we win. And that's it. We stick together peacefully and patriotically, and we win. So thanks, everyone. I'm Nick Paro. This is Banner and Backbone Palantalk, and I'll see you